Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to have back on the show our friend Congressman Ro Khanna, a Democrat representing California's 17th district. He's ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, on Oversight Committee, and co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on India and Indian Americans. Congressman Khanna, very nice to see you. Thanks so much for making time.
Great to be back on.
So the big question. We had the debate. Before the debate, you were quoted as saying, if Vice President Harris gives a clear and positive agenda, she's going to win. What do you think?
Well, she clearly won, and she
I mean, the
was charming.
presidency,
She
not
was
just the
competent.
debate. But what do you think? Like, did she fulfill that thing, that task that you believe had to be done?
I do. I think she came off as future-oriented, clear, confident, positive, charming. I think Trump came off as scowling, angry, channeling a negative energy. And so I think we're clearly have the momentum. She's winning. A couple of the polls I saw today have her up 4 or 5. The Morning Consult up to 5 points nationally. But this is still a game of inches in the battleground states, and it's going to be hard fought.
Every battleground state's within the margin of error. I mean, it really is going to be who wants it more. And I am happy to see one of the most important things, enthusiasm on our side. It's kind of dampered down. The Republicans have not grown while our side in the last month has really grown. How important do you view enthusiasm and actually voter turnout at the end of the day?
I think that's what it's going to come down to, actually, in these battleground states, because, like you said, it's a few points, 2 points, 1 point. Our side goes up by 2 points. We bragged, and the Trump goes up by a point. They brag, but ultimately, no one knows. It's all margin of the error, statistical noise, and either side could win: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona. Which is much better than we were before, because I literally think Kamala Harris could win any of those states. She could win Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Biden's path was diminishing. And she probably has a slight advantage in the blue wall, but it all comes down to turnout.
I mean, you're right. She could run the table. It could be electoral college landslide, not only 4 or 5 points nationally, or she could lose all those states. And it's up to people to come out and know now, are they registered to vote? Have they been purged? There's so much games being played by Republicans. In the debate, Donald Trump talked about in Springfield they're eating dogs, which will be a famous line going forward. And it's a funny line, but we're seeing, there was articles about an increase of vile comments made to the Haitian community in Springfield. Today, bomb threat call to the city hall in Springfield. And the mayor said the person, whoever did it, invoked immigration and Haitians. There's a concern. Like, it is a funny line, don't get me wrong. But now the real world of Donald Trump is that his words often animate action. I mean, are you concerned going forward that Donald Trump gets even more desperate between now and November 5th and intentionally animates some bad acts?
Well, it's important to point out that, yeah, it's a laughing matter because it's so silly and shows how crazy Trump can be. But it's serious. I mean, it's the degradation of immigrants in this country, and to be basically making them, dehumanizing them, to suggest that they're eating animals and committing ritualistic acts, and it's invoking fear and an ugliness that is seeping in our politics and poisoning our politics, as Trump has said that the immigrants are poisoning the blood of America. And so we can laugh at it because the vast majority of the country rejects it, but it's doing tremendous damage. And that's, imagine 4 more years of that kind of damage.
Absolutely. I can imagine it was his advisor, Hannibal Lecter, who told him to say that. I mean, it's that or Laura Loomer, who's just, it's a different world to see him hang out with Laura Loomer 2 days in a row, a woman who became known for anti-Muslim bigotry and now anti-Indian bigotry that she's writing.
Yeah.
I don't even want to amplify what she's saying. She's despicable. But the idea that the man who's a Republican nominee flies her from Florida to the debate, and then the next day is here with her in New York, yesterday on 9/11, hang out with a woman who spewed so much hate and violence and continues to, it sums up so much of what Trump is trying to do. I guess he knows what animates his base better than anyone. And she's part of that, apparently.
Yeah, but it's a double-edged sword for him. I mean, yes, it may be animating his base, but in the process, he's losing a lot of suburban voters, not just women, but just people reasonable who have a view that that's not America.
I agree. And I'm telling Congressman Ro Khanna, Congressman, within the Indian American community, how is Vice President Harris viewed? Is there a lot of excitement? Are people, I mean, I know there's partisan divides, but just in saying overall,
Oh,
what's the sense?
there's tremendous pride, there's
Right.
excitement, there's energy. There's so many people volunteering, knocking on doors, raising funds. Sense of history. I mean, and it's incredible that you may have this Indian American, African American woman transcend and become the first woman president. I mean, no one would have thought really that the first woman president would be a woman of color, and it's exciting. But people are also cautious because you see these polls saying we don't know enough about Harris,
I
and
know.
some of that is maybe the issues, and some of it is people just still cautious about change. And so I think that's why there's a sense for many of us that we've got to run through the tape. That even if we're up 2, 3 points in these states, there's not a comfort margin. That this is really going to be a hard fought race till the end.
Do you think there's that extra burden, the intangible of making history that makes it even a heavier lift than that be the first female president in our history of our nation?
I do. I mean, I just look at the results with Hillary Clinton, and I can't help but think that gender was part of it. I'm not saying it was the only thing, but when you have these close elections that are 1%, and you see Trump clearly exceeding his polls, you have to, and that historically that has happened for community candidates for women or candidates of color that they sometimes underperform their final poll. That's why I think we need to have a real push and can't assume that the just because we're up 2 points in a state means we're going to win it.
Absolutely. And the lesson from 2016 is you can't trust the polls because there were people who actually didn't come out who I knew who weren't big fans of Hillary. And they're like, well, she's going to win anyway. So I really don't want to vote for her. I'm not going to. They were in battleground states after Trump won. They're like, I would have voted. Well, to everyone out there who thinks like that, you got to go this time. We can't have this guy back in with back in with absolute immunity for almost every action or everything's an official act at the very least with presumptive immunity. How much more dangerous does that make this man?
And hanging out with this right wing conspiratorial universe, people like Loomer, I think it's going to be toxic. And I mean, he's going to have political scores to settle, vendettas to settle. And you know how you know this? Because all his advisors have told him be the unifying figure. It's in his political interest post his assassination attempt to have just given a speech of being unifying, even if he had to fake it. And he can't get himself to do that, even when it's in his electoral interest. So imagine what he's going to be like if once he has power.
He's just true to who he is, and he's not going to fake it. He is deep down bad. That's it. He's a bad guy. That's all I can say. That's simple. What I know this is overly simplistic, but what do you think President Harris has to do between now and November 5th to win this election? Is he
I think she's got to
campaigning?
keep talking about some of the economics. I mean, talk about raising the wage. You want to deal with the affordability crisis? We're going to get the wage to $17 an hour. Talk about what she's going to do again on going after the monopolies, these food processing companies that own so much of the market. Four companies, 60%, and they're hurting small grocery stores. They're hurting small producers. They're engaged in a collaboration to keep prices high, and that she's going to have the FTC go after them because that's not a free market. Talking about what she's going to do for rent and capping rent increases and building more housing, and how her sole focus is going to be working in middle class families. And I think she's starting to do that at the debate, and that's why she did well. And she just needs to continue to hammer those themes.
Yeah, and those touch people's lives and is vitally important. Shifting gears a little bit, in 19 days, the government runs out of money and they were going to have a vote this week. There were House Republicans, but they were tying it to a bill called the SAVE Act to address non-citizens voting, which is already illegal, but don't tell them because facts don't matter. But they didn't have enough votes for the 6-month continuing resolution. So they pulled it the next week. What do you think's going to happen? And are we really potentially going to have a shutdown? Because Trump said, if you can't include this SAVE Act, shut the government down.
Well, the SAVE Act would pose enormous burdens on people who are elderly, who may not have their driver's license, people who are formerly incarcerated, people who are disabled, people who are poor and live in rural communities and may not be able to go through the bureaucracy. And a lot of these are voters who happen to be Democratic because we tend to get people who are on the fringes of society and don't have advantages. and the Republicans know that. So what they're trying to do is suppress these voters in the name of election integrity. They're actually disenfranchising people. And so there's no way any Democrat is going to support this. Our whole American project has been expanding the right to franchise, not moving backwards. And Johnson knows this. So I think at the end of the day, he's going to come to Democrats to get the votes to get a continuing resolution so that we can resolve this after the election.
So you don't think there's going to be a shutdown, which is good.
I hope not. I mean, I look, if Johnson really doesn't come to Democrats, there will be a shutdown. But that's basically handing the Democrats the election, as far as I'm concerned.
The concern about this bill is what they're doing in Texas right now. I just had the head of LULAC on earlier this week talking about Ken Paxton having search warrants 2 months before elections of Latino activists and Democratic candidates and LULAC members who are registering people. And they're saying they're registering non-citizens, and literally there's no proof of it, but they can just get enough evidence to get a search warrant and harass people. And that's what I think they would do nationally. So it's concerning. How good do you feel about, or cautious do you feel about Democrats retaking the House this election?
I'm very optimistic. I think that's one thing that Harris has really boosted the enthusiasm on our side. For if we get the turnout we need, we're going to win the House. I'm most optimistic about the House. Second most optimistic about Vice President Harris, and then the Senate is uphill just because of the map. But I think we are looking good in almost every race other than Montana, and in Montana we have a shot.
We do, and I hope there could be an upset in the dream, of course, is Ted Cruz getting knocked out by Congressman Colin Allred, or in Florida. I mean, Florida is very quiet, but it's that's margin of error race right now. Rick Scott's not popular.
He's not popular. Abortion is a big issue there. The vice president has a lot of energy there. That's a winnable seat.
It would be remarkable. So I saw, look, House Republicans, the House is only in for a few more weeks because it's election year. This is what always happens, election year. I've seen rumblings of House members, Republicans trying to have hearings to hurt Vice President Harris, somehow tied to Afghanistan or wherever else they can think of. Is there anything you hear rumblings of what they might try to do to use their last few weeks in the House to try to hurt Vice President Harris?
I think they've run out of time. I think that was kind of the beauty of this change. And yeah, I mean, maybe they'll do 2 weeks of House hearings on the vice president's role in Afghanistan, but that's just not enough to break through in the news cycle and capture people's attention. And with Biden, they put all their firepower for a year and a half on 3 years of Biden, and I think that's why they're so frustrated. They feel that this was kind of the last minute change, but that's because they personalized it so much towards Biden as opposed to running on a positive agenda of their own.
I think it would be great if every 4 years we just switch candidates, like after the convention. Like, guess what? Look who you're running against now. Because think about it. They didn't even have their convention to spend every night attacking our candidate. They were attacking Biden. They spent prime time, and then they have to, it's too bad. They have to be frustrated. It wasn't anything we planned. We thought President Biden was going to be our candidate. It's not like we want, it just happened.
We did. I was defending Biden to the last day, and I thought he's been a phenomenal president on so many scores. I've disagreed with him on the Middle East, but other than that, have really admired him. And he made a decision for the good of the party, good of the country, and so far it looks like he made the right decision.
Very true. And since you invoked the Middle East just for a second here, I saw where you had commented Vice President Harris. At least seems her language is vastly different than President Biden. She's a different generation, a different mindset approaching Gaza. She's expressed more empathy and compassion to Palestinian dignity and self-determination than I've heard from any Democratic candidate running for president, to be blunt. But people want to see a policy change. So, I mean, do you think in time, whatever that is, whatever it's going to be, something different, because this is not working, do you think she'll be open to it if she wins?
I hope so. I think that the empathy is there. The call for Palestinian self-determination was critical. And I've urged her to and her team to say, let's just talk about enforcing U.S. law, U.S. security assistance law, U.S. Leahy law, and that, yes, you're going to put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages, but you're also going to stop the policy of a blank check to Netanyahu, who's half of Israeli society is opposed to. So I'm hopeful they will get there.
I hope so too. It's still an issue percolating in the Arab Muslim community and some of our younger allies a lot, where it's not in the headlines, but I see it online. I see them commenting about it. And I wrote about it for MSNBC when Bernie Sanders, just enforce the Foreign Security Assistance Act. That's all we're having. We're not asking for new law, nothing new. Just here's U.S. law. Have the State Department do an investigation, which they did afterwards, which for what it's worth. But I think it's a fundamental. I don't know if some of the leaders in the party get that for younger people, it's not an issue like politics. It's about values. It's much bigger. It's not. If it wasn't Gaza, if it was somewhere else, they'd have the same response because U.S. weapons are involved and their values are being offended. They're like, you're doing this to these people, and we're doing with. If it was the reverse, if we had armed Hamas, I know it's outrageous, but say that happened, they did this to Israelis. I think they'd have the same response. Like, what are we doing? We're arming these people to slaughter these other people. This is just wrong. And I wonder if they get that. It's not political per se. It's not Palestinian per se. It's a human rights issue and a humanitarian crisis, and their hearts hurt. The younger people, and they watch it. And I talk to them about this.
I agree completely. It's about what kind of country we're going to be, what kind of country they're supporting. And many of them may not even know the full history of the conflict and the story of two peoples and Israeli self-determination and the self-determination of the Jewish people and the self-determination of the Palestinian people. They just see it and they see young kids getting blown up and families getting killed. And they say, we don't want American weapons to be part of that. And how do we stop the violence? How do we get the hostages out? It's a very human response.
Very much so. And the way a lot of the younger people have been smeared as anti-Israel protests when they're really pro-humanitarian protests, pro-humanity. It's not, they just don't get it or they don't care to get it. That's the reality. By the way, last two things I saw that congressional Democrats talking about pressing oil executives on information on Donald Trump offering to do their bidding for $1 billion, which he is the most transactional guy in the world. And he's serious about this. This is what we know. I mean, is there time to, I know you're in the minority. Are Senate Democrats going to do anything? Is there time to have hearings?
Well, we're working on it with Jamie Raskin and Sheldon Whitehouse at the oversight hearing. I think we'll have again hearings to bring it up, but even if not official and informal, given that we're in the minority. But, similar to the hearings for the vice president, I mean, the time is run short in terms of congressional action really influencing the election. I think this is a street by street brawl over turnout, and is going to be won in the swing states and organizing. I don't think what Washington does, other than Mike Johnson trying to shut down government, which would be the biggest political blunder. So maybe that could swing things, but other than that, I don't think much of what Congress does is going to matter.
How much does that? Do you get a sense the House GOP is controlled by Trump because he put in writing, if you don't pass the SAVE Act, shut down government? I mean, do you think that weighs with enough of them? Has enough influence with enough of them?
Who knows? And he always flip flops. I mean, if they won't go to him and say, "Okay, we'll shut down government, and you'll lose the presidency," I mean, maybe he rethinks it. But who knows? I mean, no one can predict him. That's the truth.
So overall, because we probably won't talk again before Election Day, you're feeling good?
I am feeling good. I mean, look, I don't want to jinx it, but if I were betting today, I'd bet on a President Harris. But that's that's assuming that the momentum continues and that we all work hard and turn out to vote.
Well, maybe you'll be in the administration. Who knows? We'll see how it works out. But Congressman, it's always great chatting with you, my friend. Keep up the great fight. You're doing a great job as a fiery
Thank you, Dean. I really admire your voice.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, my friend.